You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with Damien Swaby. Listen to conversations with award-winning filmmakers, directors from the golden age of television, and creatives from the indie film community who continue to inspire the next generation of filmmakers. And now, over to your host, Damien Swaby.
In today's episode, we chat with Jess, a talented filmmaker whose passion for video production started in high school and led to a great career in Los Angeles. Stay tuned as Jess shares insights on transitioning from the East Coast to the West Coast, the early influences that shaped her career, and the continuous drive for storytelling that keeps her inspired. Let's dive into this conversation.
So it all really began in high school for me, junior high school. I took a multimedia class with a teacher named Mr. Ferreira, and it was my first introduction to kind of like the world of video production and making films. And really the class, it was like, we were making a lot of like fun, kind of silly films. We would get scripts and we would do like a mock Mastercard commercial. Do you remember
brilliant.
those Mastercard commercials? That was like the priceless.
In the UK, we may have a slightly different one.
Maybe, yeah. So
Mastercard,
it was like the priceless Mastercard commercials. And so we would learn, we'd have to like come up with an idea, script it out, storyboard it. We'd also be learning Photoshop. So we'd be making like the Mastercard logo in Photoshop.
Nice.
And so, yeah, that's really how it all began. And at the time we were editing on iMovie.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just I had like some VHS camera, and yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And my best friend was in the class with me too. And that sort of just began the whole process of like learning how to make films and make short films. And then I took a Multimedia 2 class after that. And then after that, my best friend and I actually advocated to have a third multimedia class created so that we could take it another year. I think at that point I was maybe a junior in high school, but we just wanted more of it. We wanted to do more. We want to make more films. And just at that point we were getting Final Cut Pro on the computers. So those few years in high school, that made me want to then pursue communications and video production in college. And so I went to Elon University. I majored in cinema there. And then my initial interest was actually, I enjoyed filming, but at the time I was really interested in editing more so. I think there was something about like, just crafting a story together and like choosing the right shots and the right cuts. Like I just was really interested in the editing process. And so I kind of focused mostly on that throughout my high school and college career. But the cinema major, it was a little bit of everything. Took a class called Media Law and Ethics. There was a documentary filmmaking class. There was like an editing class, just a little bit of everything.
How do you advocate for a third year?
I don't remember exactly what we did, but I just remember we were super passionate about it. And we went to like the school board, talked to whoever. I think we talked to our teacher and we said, we want to take another multimedia class. Like what do we do? We've already done Multimedia 1 and Multimedia 2. And I think he might have suggested like, well, you'd have to talk to the school about there being another class. And so I think we ended up speaking to someone's, and then And of course, our teacher was on board to, also keep on with this as well. So he was really involved he was an amazing influence, and he was really involved and really helpful and supportive of us. And we were also on the morning announcements, which were televised.
Wow.
Throughout our school. So again, my best friend and I, we were just really involved in all this like video, video stuff. And he also, that our teacher also was part of the morning announcements. He would film it. He would, help capture the whole thing. So yeah. And I think just a mix of passion and showing our passion and our motivate. It's like, we want to learn more, how does a school say no to that?
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
And what were some of the first projects your friend and yourself worked on?
It's funny that I'm talking about this because I actually just recently connected with my high school teacher. He sent over via email and like a Google Drive or something like that, all of our video projects from high school. So I now have them because they were initially,
Nice.
a lot of them were actually put onto DVDs, but I would need to digitize that and find it first of all. So I've just started, I was watching some of some of the stuff we made back then. I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of cringe. But yeah, like the Mastercard commercial was one. Late for a Date was another one. It was just, I can't remember. I think we were given like a premise, one person is, late for a date and meeting this other person, and they have to go like certain elements in the storyboard we had to include, but that was kind of up for interpretation. So like, we would do different versions of that. And then what else? We also ended up working on, we did a drunk driving PSA. I remember that one. And then towards our senior year, we actually ended up working on the senior movie, which every senior class has like a kind of big senior movie where, you kind of go through like, pictures of us from kindergarten and kind of like the whole journey of the whole senior class and from when they started school. And so we contributed to that with a few other classmates also working on it. But I went to a pretty small school. My graduating high school had a class of like 160, and that was considered big. So
Okay.
I knew, it was, a lot of people I like knew the whole entire, from kindergarten all the way through.
So transitioning from Pennsylvania in the East Coast to Los Angeles, that must have been a significant change. So how did this move influence your career and your passion for the outdoors?
When I was in college, I had an opportunity to do an internship in LA the summer before my senior year of college. And at the time, in my mind, before I was graduating, I thought like it would either be New York City or LA for me in order to pursue film and television production. And growing up on the East Coast, I spent a lot of time in New York City, weekend trips. And so the West Coast was just totally new and unexplored territory. And then when I did the internship in LA, I love the beach. I love the weather. I loved how spread out kind of LA was versus New York City, where you're just like, all these tall buildings. And so I just thought, I want to give this a shot. Not only do I get to see what a new city is like to live in, but also there's more to see along the entire West Coast. So as I started working as a post-production assistant in reality TV, it was the internship that I actually had the summer before my senior year. They hired me to be like full time with them a year later when I moved out there. And so kind of during that my first like few years of living in LA, I just got really interested in hiking on the weekends, taking weekend trips whenever there'd be a holiday, just wanting to explore as much of the West Coast as I could, driving up the PCH, going up to San Francisco, Joshua Tree, Yosemite.
Nice.
Yeah. And then at one point I went on this epic road trip where we went from, I forget what holiday it was, or if we just, I don't know, maybe East, like spring break or something like that. But, went from, through Utah up to Yellowstone National Park, Glacier National Park, through Washington, back down Crater Lake, all these different, a lot of like
Huge.
national parks. And
Yeah.
I love the diversity of nature and the epic mountains out here. I was camping, getting really into camping and hiking a lot, and just like spending a lot of time in nature. And it's just, the East Coast is really lush, and there's hills and there's nature there, of course, too. But it's like the dramatic landscape I just really fell in love with out here, and the diversity too.
Oh, I completely understand the landscape. When I went to Yosemite and a few other places, it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I just couldn't get my head around what I was seeing. Closest I've ever had in regard to that experience was when I was working in Iceland, and some of the scenery there is amazing. Like, it really blew my mind. But I find it fascinating that one country, America, has got a place like New York with these big buildings and, really heavy duty city in that sense. And then you can go to another part of the country and you see some of the most beautiful wildlife and scenery you could possibly imagine, all in one place. I think that must be a amazing place to live and appreciate.
There's a lot to explore in the US. I mean, I've spent a lot of my time outside of the country, but I've also done a lot here as well. And
And what are the pitiful, I can't even speak today, pitiful moments or projects that have helped your career as a TV producer as it blossomed in Los Angeles?
I can't really think of a singular moment or project, really. I think a lot of it was persistence, it was time, it was climbing the ladder. I feel like there were a lot of women and men, but a lot of women that I can think of that were in more like senior roles, and they saw my talent and they believed in me, and they would just, after a year or so in one role, then I would move up to the next position. So I really just I started as a post PA, and then I was an associate producer, and then a story associate producer, and then a story producer, and then doing some field
Wow.
producing. So, but that was, over the course of, 7 years. So, really just a lot of time. And doing good work, I guess. And now I no longer work in that space specifically. I'm no longer in TV production or reality TV. I shifted my focus to doing more photography, being more behind the camera, photo, video, working with brands and entrepreneurs and organizations, more short films. But for almost like a decade, I would say I was mostly in the kind of nonfiction reality TV world.
And your solo backpacking trips across Central America, Southeast Asia, New Zealand, Australia are truly impressive. To travel like that working is very inspiring for a lot of the listeners and myself, I must admit.
Yeah.
So what motivated you to embark on these adventures, and how have they shaped you personally?
Yeah, so I could talk about this probably the whole podcast.
Okay.
I could talk about travel, so I'll try to rein it in. But yeah, actually, kind of coming out of what I was just talking about in terms of reality TV, I think after about 6 years living in LA, I realized I was just feeling pretty unfulfilled with the work that I was doing. A lot of the shows I worked on, it just like not meaningful to me. It felt like just a job. Um,
Yeah.
if I were to be working on like Anthony Bourdain, that would have been a whole different story, I think. But I wasn't. I was on like wedding shows and stuff, and I had a lot of positive experiences from that too. Learned a lot about storytelling, but yeah, I just felt that I was doing a little bit of travel. It was like Texas and maybe like Vegas and just some domestic travel with my production work here and there. Whether it was like working on a show for a few months at a time or working on a sizzle reel, um, where we'd have to travel to San Diego for a night or two, something like that. But I had been dreaming of traveling ever since I had studied abroad in Italy, which I did when I was in college, the fall semester of my senior year of college. I studied abroad in Italy. That was my first time abroad. And I ended up, you know, doing the hostel thing,
Oh gosh. Yeah.
traveling around Europe a bit, going to places like Barcelona and Amsterdam and Dublin and Switzerland and a bunch of other places. And so that really like stuck with me. And I remember thinking, I want to get paid to travel. I want a job that like
Yeah.
allows me more travel. And after 6 years of being in LA, I realized I hadn't even left the country. And I was fortunate to, have spent this time exploring the West Coast and other places domestically, but I was just like really itching for more. And I read an article. Actually, it was like the morning before I was about to go to my TV job. I read an article about, it was like why to travel the world while you're still young or something like that. And I
Yeah.
read this article and I just thought, this is what I want to do. Like this, I need to do this. I have to do this. This is like, I feel it in my bones.
What
And
was in the
so,
article that made you feel this?
um, I think it was just the freedom. Like I think it was a guy that was just like backpacking around the world. And, um, I think it wasn't as expensive as it like sounded like it would be. And just seeing all these different places. A lot of it was nature and it was just places I've never been. And I think the photography was beautiful too.
Mm.
And so, yeah, all I remember was just feeling really inspired that like, I want to be living this kind of life too. And so I went out that week and I bought a bunch of books at the bookstore, like how to travel the world on $50 a day, was a book at the time. And then Vagabonding was another really good book that really inspired me. And I had a bunch of others, but I just poured through those books and kind of came up with a plan of, okay, I need to save money. At the time I was
Mm.
living on my own, paying, I don't know, like $1,300 rent. And I decided to get a roommate, or to move in a place where I could have a roommate. And so I cut my rent in half and
Nice one.
yeah, spent time just saving, as much as I could. And that's kind of how it all began. My first trip was a little sooner than I think I was anticipating, but I the nice thing about working in television production, was that you would be on a job for maybe 4, 6, 8 months at a time, and then the contract would end, like the show would end, and usually people just hop on to the next job they can because they just want to keep getting work and paid. But I realized like, oh, what if I just allowed myself a little bit of time off and rather than stressing about when the next job is going to land in my lap, like go travel. And so I decided to travel to Costa Rica for 6 weeks by myself, backpacking, staying in hostels. And that was kind of like the trial. Like I wasn't really planning it that way, but maybe I was. Yeah, I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. And I loved it. And then a year later, I was selling all my things, putting it into storage, and putting the rest into storage, and then taking off for, I went back to Central America for 3 months and then over to Southeast Asia for about 6 or 7 months. So it was like a 9-month total trip that I did, where I was just living off my savings. I wasn't even working. It was just to travel, just to see these places.
Now that is some fuel for the creative juices, I imagine. Seeing so much Southeast Asia and Central America alone, in my experience, are quite different. So as well as seeing New Zealand, and I've never been there, but it looks great, and Australia, I've never been there either. But I can see how that can be very motivational to you to have those experiences in your life, professionally and personally, shaping you to become who you are today.
Yeah. And to go off that, like how it's shaped me. I personally, I feel like it's that whole experience was like the catalyst for really trying to be more intentional about how I want to live my life and what I want to be doing with my life and the life that I want to create for myself. And I didn't want to be doing the 9 to 5 and only 2 weeks of vacation a year. I was like, I don't believe in that anymore. And it just fueled my curiosity and desire to want to travel more and experience different ways of living. And I met a lot of digital nomads, even though I wasn't really doing the digital nomad thing at the time, but I was just like so inspired by people and how they were living their lives. And so over the years, I've slowly created a lifestyle to allow me to do those things where I do get to, like, I do prioritize travel. And like, that means I might not, might not be working as much, and therefore may not always be making as much, but then I've traveled a lot this year already so far.
So if you hadn't have taken this backpacking trip across all of these countries after reading these books, what type of person do you think you would be when you're holding the camera trying to create content?
Might just be like filming things. It's so hard to say, but maybe I'd be filming stuff just for the sake of filming it. Versus I feel that the traveling, I kind of found what I was passionate about and what inspires me. And that kind of ends up being where I put my focus and like where I want to, what kind of stories I want to tell. Like when I've traveled, I've been so inspired. And so I kind of seek out those inspiring stories. Whereas like when I was working in TV production, there's some shows out there that just aren't that, they're just there for entertainment. They're not exactly the most like meaningful, inspiring stuff. So
how do you balance the demands of working for various travel and wellness brands while maintaining a focus on meaningful storytelling?
Yeah. I've been fortunate to work with either individuals or certain companies where the stories are inherently meaningful and inspiring. For example, I've worked with people who are running yoga retreats or wellness retreats, and they need testimonial videos or some sort of promotional video, or this essential oil company that I created a lot of videos for them. The stories of the women, it's just like an essential oil bottle, but the stories of the women that use these products, they have these really moving stories where they might have been experiencing like postpartum depression or like gut health or some issues with their gut and just different health, mental or health issues that inspire them to get into using these essential oils and now incorporate them in their life. And so that was the story that we were telling when I'd be interviewing them and capturing these videos. That being said, there's content that I might create for like a van rental company. For example, I've done worked for a few different van rental companies, and that content it's fun, it's light, it's a little bit more, it might not be as deep and it's just marketing, like here's like a fun adventure you can have with the van, here's the type of experiences you can have, here's where you can go. But that involves some maybe creative. I can be a little bit more creative with filming or editing. I get to be outside. It's fun to make. I'm in nature. I get to fly the drone. Like it's all, it's a little bit more fun. And so it's nice to have a balance of the two.
Oh gosh, I can imagine.
And I would say I'm starting to work. For a while, I was maybe not doing as much work with brands. I did it a little bit, and now I'm actually starting to get back into that and starting to work with some more brands. And I think one thing that I'm looking to do is to be developing relationships with these brands. Maybe it starts off with a more kind of basic marketing video, but we can go deeper eventually. And it's like recognizing those stories and pitching those and pitching those to the brands and saying, oh, why don't we, like, what is your backstory? Like, why did you start this company? Like and going a little deeper. So I think there's opportunities, but maybe just getting your foot in the door, might start with something a little bit lighter. And, a lot of people need stuff for social media these days.
So when you have to do something, for want of a better word, meaningful or more inspirational, say, what techniques or approaches do you use to ensure that your content not only entertains, but also inspires?
I like to share what inspires me. And I assume that if it inspires me, someone else out there might be inspired by it too. For example, I love, on my personal Instagram, I just love to show beautiful places. And
She certainly does, everyone listening.
Yeah. I'll get comments or DMs of people asking like questions about the place I just visited, and they say they want to go and they're inspired to visit. And so
that's very inspiring.
And then I feel like more recently I've been trying to include a little bit more like facts about nature, about animals, or about the environment into the stuff that I share, just to mix it up a bit, where it's not just only a pretty photo. I think for a while though I was just sharing the pretty photo, but now I'm trying to like mix it up a little bit more.
Okay, great. And I have to geek out a bit on some of the tech side of things.
Yeah.
So typically when you take some of those photos that I've seen on Instagram, what kit are you using? What, a DSLR, mirrorless, or
I have a Sony A7 IV.
Oh, I've got an A7 III. Okay.
Nice. Yeah, I had a 3 as well. Sony A7 IV. My newest piece of gear is a Sony 200 to 600 millimeter lens, which I've been using for wildlife. And that's been amazing. My partner, Daniel, he's gotten really into wildlife photography too over the last year. And that's just inspired me as well. And he has the same lens, but rather than trying to be like, hey, can I borrow that? Like I realized like with wildlife, the moment is brief. It can be brief. So we each have our own lens, and we were just in Canada for like the main reason. The main kind of reason for going was to see as much wildlife as possible. And so like even like the time of year that we went, we're just the peak time of year to see bears, and we saw 13.
Oh, wow. That is a good amount. I've seen
Yeah.
one. So
Yeah. Yeah. Up until that point, I had only seen maybe one or two in Yellowstone, kind of far away on the side of a mountain, not that close. But then we were just in the Canadian Rockies, and it would just most of the times when we saw bears, it was just from our vehicle on the side of the road, but we would be pretty close. Yeah.
So the photos at your home must be amazing if you're both wildlife photographers. The photos on the walls must be insane.
You know what? That's actually something that is really sad, that we have like barely printed any photos.
Okay.
That's something we're going to change. We're going to change this year. So, and the wildlife photography is very new for both of us, I'd say. I honestly used to not be as into wildlife photography. I think probably part of the reason was just I would take a photo of an animal. I wasn't using the right lens. It's like if you need it once you have like that beast of a lens and you can be so much closer, it's a whole other game. But I think I was focused on other stuff for a while, that investing in that type of lens wasn't really it just wasn't a priority yet. But now I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately for me, when I tried to do some, I bought a lot of lens adapters, and the crop factor made the focal length even shorter. When I was doing some of the videos, like on a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera.
Yep. Yeah. Nice.
The crop factor is a pain for those things. So I was happy to go back to full frame.
Yeah.
So whenever I do get a lens or hire another lens for photography or videography in regard to wildlife, I'm not missing things, changing lens or changing things, and then the bird flies away or the whatever flies away. So I completely understand what you mean there.
Yeah.
And you've been known to have the ability to handle odd locations and strange circumstances with ease. Can you share an example of this and how you managed it?
Yeah. I would say I have a fairly high tolerance level.
That's good.
And probably a lot of years of personal growth and
nice. Are you suggesting maybe you wasn't always you wasn't someone who always had a high tolerance level?
I think I've just gotten to be a little more calm in maybe intense situations, less reactive. One of my most favorite books I ever read was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And it is just, when I was in Southeast Asia, I kind of started my whole like personal growth journey. And I did Vipassana meditation, which is 10 days, silent meditation, no talking for 10 days. All you're doing is,
Sorry, for 10 days, no talking.
Yeah. 10 days meditating 10 hours a day.
Wow.
And no talking. Like nothing. You're not supposed to journal or exercise or read or listen to like music or nothing. Like literally you're there to meditate. And this is available all throughout the world. So you can find a Vipassana center in the UK if you want to do it. Okay. And it's only donation based. It doesn't cost anything. So I did this in Myanmar, and I was in the process of also reading The Power of Now. And a lot of it is about recognizing that, a feeling that you might have, an emotion that you might have it will arise and it will pass, like this too shall pass, and everything's impermanent. And reading The Power of Now, I recognized that I kind of learned to be the observer of my thoughts, and that allows like a pause in scenarios rather than me reacting to something. I can almost have like a breath, a pause, realize what I might be thinking, and decide, is that something I want to say right now, or like, how do I want to handle the situation? So it's being more less reactive and like choosing how you want to respond to something. So I don't know I think we were talking about something else, but I think,
No,
just over the years, that's really helped like ground me and become a bit, maybe like just a little less intense. But I would say, one project that comes to mind for me was working on a sustainable fishing mini documentary for bumblebee tuna, and that was in Indonesia. And we were island hopping, kind of like new location every day. One of the nights we had like a 2 or 3 a.m. wake up call where we were getting on the boat with these fishermen, and we're out on the boat all day. I was the B camera and the drone operator. And so I'm like launching a drone from this boat, also trying to catch the drone on the boat. Back on the beach, I was filming the drone with all these kids like running up, probably never seen a drone before. And so they're surrounding me and I'm trying to get the shot. So just like kind of like chaotic situations. But I think like when I'm filming or when I am taking photos, like doing photography, I really get in the zone. I really get into a flow. I get into like a flow state, and I don't know what's going on in the world. I don't think about anything else that's going on in the world, in my life. Like I'm just so present and so focused on, trying to get the shot or trying to,
But finally, what message would you leave with our listeners, particularly those who are passionate about nature, travel, and making a positive impact through media?
Travel, even if you have to travel solo. Don't be afraid to travel alone. You won't be alone. You'll meet so many people along the way. I met some of my favorite people in the world while I was traveling. And if anyone has questions about that, I'm happy to, feel free to reach out to me, DM me. I'm happy to talk about that. But like I remember being a little afraid. And then once I started, I realized this is the best thing ever. And you'll like meet other people along the way. And for nature, spend time in nature, learn about the environment and climate change. I spent a lot of time. That's how I learned a lot, was through watching documentaries and spending time in nature and feeling like the impact and beauty of this world, and really feeling inspired to make some changes in my life. I would say always be learning. That's something I'm trying to get better at myself. For a while, I feel like I just didn't, just like wasn't looking to like up level my skills and just kind of waiting to get hired for something. But I think it's so important to always be learning. I'm actually in this documentary course called Art of Documentary, and there's a quote that was mentioned, that documentary filmmaking is a pathway to empathy. And I think that with with storytelling, you can really bridge understanding and compassion and empathy, and the world would be a better place for it.
Excellent. Jess, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. And in the show notes, I'm going to put your website and everything else. So if anybody wants to reach out to you, or anybody wants to see some of your work and see some of your beautiful photographs on Instagram, they'll be able to do that right there in the show notes. So just thanks
Awesome.
again, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you, Damien. So nice to be on here. Appreciate it.